during lunch. But you got to text in your questions. I don't know, you don't have to text in your question, you can ask a question. But if you'd like to text a question, like a really juicy one, and you don't want anybody to know who it is, you can text your question to 803-829-6743. That number again is 803-829-6743. I'll leave that up here if you want to look at it. So you can do that. Well, I don't know about you, but I slept great in your parking lot. My family, we were out there in the RV and it slept great. It was quiet. I kept thinking, because you're like under a wind advisory. I kept thinking, I don't like when you're in an RV, you don't like weather. You like sunshine and stillness, because sometimes it really sways. But I never felt any, so I don't know, maybe the wind hasn't hit yet, I don't know. Has anybody been watching the weather, like the hurricane? What's the update? Off of Charleston. Is it as bad as they thought? Is it?
Yeah, it looks like the worst of the winds just went over Palm Beach, but that's nothing more than 7 miles. So it's getting better.
It's getting better now? All right. Okay, because I'm supposed to be in Dublin, North Carolina, tomorrow. That's like 100 miles towards the ocean, but I think it's kind of a little north. I couldn't even find it. You know how you look in the back of your map and you look up where it says it's on D10 and you kind of cross? It wasn't in the back of my map, so I'm thinking, oh man, it's really small. But I finally found it. And then I have to be down in south of Charleston, right on the ocean on Monday, so I don't know if I'll be able to be there. So we're going to, hopefully, their problems are bigger than having me there. So, but during this time, we're going to talk about, things that we need to teach our children. Because you can skip a lot of things, you can fail on a lot of things, and your kids are going to be okay. But there's some things that we've got to teach our children. Because, I used to start a workshop, and say, never before have we lived in such a time. But the truth is, we've always lived in times like these. We've always lived in political turmoil and natural catastrophes and economic crisis. But here's the deal. Your children are going to face things that really we can't even imagine right now. Because not to be all doom and gloom, but, just things that have changed. And, things that when I was in high school in 1983, it's just a total different world that we live in now. I can't even imagine 20 more years. And your children are going to need to know how to live dangerously. And by dangerously, I don't mean like, that they're going to need to bungee jump off of bridges and things like that, or, cross their eyes until they stick. Not that kind of dangerous, not Marlboro Man kind of dangerous, but the kind that goes countercultural. And they're going to learn it from you. And so I kind of made a list of things, of ways we need to teach our children to live dangerously. And here's the very first one. We need to train our children to trust God dangerously. To trust God dangerously. What's the opposite of dangerous trusting? Safe. And what does safe trusting look like? Comfortable, right? Not taking any chances. Kind of like, it's probably going to happen anyway, So if you get all your ducks in a row, then it's easy to trust God. But that's not the kind of trusting that the Bible is filled with. And the best way to teach our children about, trusting dangerously is by getting them in the Word, right? And so we make that a priority in our house, we don't, I'll tell you in a minute, but that's not the best way. I kind of led you in that direction. The best way is along with that, because we have memorized verses about trusting God and how He can be trusted. But would you like to guess what the best way to teach your children how to trust God dangerously? By example. I don't know who said it, but someone said, example isn't the main thing; it's the only thing. Because it's true, isn't it? Because we can teach our kids all we want, but if we're not doing it, they won't do it. In fact, in my house, again, we do put a priority on the Bible. We put a priority on trusting God. And sometimes we'll have family devotions. I don't know about you, but family devotions for dads are hard, because there are some dads who start the day they have a child or the day they get married, and quit when they die, and they don't miss any days. I'm not that dad. You know, we try to have it in the mornings. Sometimes that doesn't work, so we try to have it in the evenings, and sometimes we skip a morning, or skip a week of mornings, or a year of mornings, you know. But we come back, and we try again. And, you know, we'll start off with a song, you know. Sometimes we'll start off with, this is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. And now, I'm not trying to teach my kids how to worship, because that would be like wishful thinking, because ours doesn't feel at all like worship. You know, if I can paddle one of my kids during the time, it doesn't feel like, hey, we even had a successful, you know, morning devotional. But what am I trying to teach my children when we sing that song, This is the Day? Theologically, what am I trying to teach them? We're singing the scripture, yeah. But what's the truth of the song?
God made the day.
God made the day, no matter what. If it's rainy, if it's sunny, if I have a job, if I don't have a job, we will rejoice. And then we'll sing, He's got the whole world in His hand. He's got the whole... What am I trying to teach my children then?
God's in control.
God's in control. Is that true?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Are you positive? You know, sometimes it's easy to say that here, but when I get behind the wheel of my RV, everything changes. You know, and now everything that was black and white now is really gray. And I remember one time we were on the way to Duluth, Minnesota, and we were going through Janesville, Wisconsin. And as we were driving through, I was kind of watching my gauges. I always am watching my gauges. And I noticed in my voltmeter that tells me how much voltage is either coming in or out of my alternator. I'm not sure. You can tell me later. But it's supposed to be somewhere between 12 and 14. And as I was watching it, it was just dropping, like it was running out of something. You know, it was like 6, 4, 2, peg. And I'm thinking, something should be happening, you know? And so I call up my dad, who can fix anything. I'm like, Dad, how long can my RV run without an alternator? And before he could even say one word, the whole thing just went, and I'm like, never mind, Dad, I know. And so I hung up. And I found if I drove really, really slow, like about a mile an hour, the RV would run. And so I saw a Swiss Chalet restaurant on an overpass with a single car on front of it, so I'm all the way up there, you know. I get up there and I'm like, hey, is there a place that can work on my RV? And they said, yeah, I can go back the same way you came, about 3 miles, and so I'm, you know, for 3 miles. And then we get to this place, and they can't work on it, but there's a great big old parking lot, and a tow truck's coming to get me again. And I'm just like pacing out in front like a caged lion. You know, I'm thinking, oh, we're going to be late, we're going to miss our next event, you know, this is going to cost us, how much is it going to cost, that's what they were going to pay us, you know, and all that stuff. And I'm back and forth, my kids are yelling things out the window like, hey, Dad, did you try starting it? You know, really helpful things. My wife's like, honey, did you change the oil before we left? Ladies, if you find yourself in a similar situation, just you know what I'm saying. And so I'm back and forth, back and forth. Finally, my son, Ike, he sticks his head out the window. He's tow-headed, you know, white-headed. He's like, Dad, and I'm like, what? And he goes, maybe we should sing. And I'm like, sing? Why would we sing right now? And he goes, you know, like, he's got the whole world in his hands. At that moment, what was I teaching my children? That God cannot be trusted. We can memorize the verses. We can have them read the accounts that happen. But in real life, He lets you down. Now, unfortunately, God got a hold of my heart. I'm like, oh, you're right, Ike. And so we went inside and we sang, He's got the whole world in His hands. I don't know. You know, I don't know what's going on in your life right now. But can God be trusted? Yes. If you're on the verge of losing your job, can God still be trusted? Yes. I don't know, you know, you may be freaking out about what's happening, you know, on this race to the White House. And you're going, I don't know what we're going to do if this person's elected or if this person's elected or if either one of them are elected. You know, if you're freaking out, what are you teaching your children? The God's not in control of it. He is in control of who's going to be in our White House, right? He is. He is. And even if the worst possible scenario plays out, He's not thrown by that. And maybe one of the best things you can teach your children, you know, as they're watching you every day, 24/7, 365 days out of the year, to see how you handle this, is sometimes even as dads, you know, when we gather our family in a circle and we say, you know, I've taught you something. By the way I've acted, I've been freaking out and showing you that God's not in control, but He is in control. You know? How about we all sing? You know, He's got the whole world in His hands. Is that an important lesson to teach your children? Yes. Now, I should say, now these are not lessons that you like, you know, that when you're all done, your kids are perfect. Because I used to think that. When I got my little lump of clay, and it kind of looked like a lump of clay, and, you know, that my job was to mold him and knock off all the hard edges, and then by the time he walked out of my house, he was perfect. Now, perfect, I didn't mean perfect. I just meant, you know, he wouldn't be having any of that grumpiness anymore. He wouldn't have any of those irresponsible things. He would try, you know, that's not true. You know, even when we do our jobs, as we should, with lots of holes, God's got lots of lessons to come afterwards. Some of them are really painful. You know, I mean, the truth is, my children may have to be fired from a job or two to learn something. You know, they may have to sleep on the couch, you know, or sleep in a hotel while their wife figures it out, you know. And unfortunately, that's kind of embarrassing. It looks bad on me, but that's the way God has to teach me. And I'm okay with that. You know, and that takes some of the pressure off, too. So I think we need to teach our children how to trust God dangerously. In fact, I wrote a little booklet called Dream Big, you know, and beware of the dream killers. But, you know, really, that's what it is. It's about going into the deep. It's about doing those crazy things that God has asked you to do, and everybody else thinks it's crazy, but you do it anyway. You know, and you all have those dreams, right? God puts those in your head or heart, and usually, like the book says, usually there are people around you telling you why you shouldn't do what you should do. You know, why you will, well, even though you believe it, go, is that the best use of your time or your money, or in this economy, should you be doing that? The thing is, we as parents, we become those dream killers to our own kids, because all our kids are dreamers, right? They come into the world as dreamers. You know, and they're like, I want to be a baseball player. And the first thing we say is, you know how many people can be a baseball player? Not many people can be a baseball player. You know, and you're really not that good. And so we feel like it's our job to squish their dreams. And what happens is they either quit drinking and they themselves become dream killers later on, quit trusting God, or, you know, they just don't tell you their dreams anymore and they tell other people. So we want to train our children to trust God dangerously. Another thing we want to train our children is to love dangerously. What's the opposite of dangerous loving? Safe loving. Thank you. She's not afraid. These are not trick questions. And and what does safe loving look like? Huh? Hesitant? Maybe. That's true. Kind of like not putting your full weight on something, you know, kind of like not being afraid, or afraid of being hurt, maybe, that kind of thing. What were you saying? Not being real. Or maybe it's kind of like, I'll love you if you love me. I'll smile at you if you smile at me. I'll be nice to you if you're nice to me. You know, I'm pretty good at that kind of loving, actually. I even like that kind of loving. But that's not the kind of loving the Bible talks about. In fact, the best way to teach them about dangerous loving is to, you know, we can have memorized those verses about how God loved us while we were still sinners, you know, and verses like that, or passages like that, of sacrificial love. But that's not the best way. The best way is along with that. What's the best way? By giving yourself. You know, it's easy for me to love you people because, you know, we're at I don't want to say not a shallow level, but, you know, I'll be nice to you if you get up and leave in a storm and say, or, you know, I don't care. If you fall asleep in the middle of my talk, it won't bother me. I'm not going to snub you later and, you know, underhandedly say something mean to you. But I'll do that to the people in my family. Because that's where the real rubber meets the road. And that's where the lesson is happening every single day. You know, because I want to teach my children how to love God dangerously. We call that love, what kind of love do we call that? Huh? Unconditional, sacrificial. I was thinking unconditional. Unconditional love means what? Regardless of the situation. That's a great definition. Regardless of the situation. You know, we talk about that kind of love, right? In fact, my son Sam, he's 21 now, but when he was a little kid, we used to play this unconditional love game. I don't know how it got invented, but it did. It was always at bedtime, and it was always when the lights would go off. You know, then the lights would go off, and he'd say, "Hey, Dad," and I knew it was starting. And I'd say, "What, Sam?" He'd say, "Will you love me no matter what?" And I'd say, "I'll love you no matter what, Sam." And then he would kind of go down through a list, and he'd say, "What about if I don't obey you?" I said, "Well, even if you don't obey me, I'll still love you." He'd say, "What about if I hurt someone?" "Well, even if you hurt someone, I'll still love you." He'd say, "Well, what about if I hit him with a brick?" "Well, even if you hit him with a brick, I'll still love you." And he'd say, "Well, what if I steal a car?" Now, he was only like 6. And I'm like, "Well, even if you steal a car, I'll still love you." And then he would think of the worst thing his little mind could think, you know, and he would kind of get real serious and giggle at the same time. And he'd say, "Dad, what if I kill someone?" And then I would get really serious. And I would say, "Samuel, even if you kill someone, I will always, always, always love you, because I'm your dad. But don't kill anybody, okay, Sam?" And he'd go, "Okay, Dad, good night." And that was good for him, I guess. So far, he's never killed anybody, so it worked out real well. But I know parents who come up to me afterwards and say, "My son or daughter did kill someone. Am I supposed to love them unconditionally?" And the answer is yes. Yes. It's easy to play that game when they're little, you know, because they're easy to love. I mean, I don't know if you have teenagers but you know, I mean, you can just see the difference. Like when you have a little baby, and I love the sounds of babies, and I miss babies, and you know, when a baby spits up on your shoulder, what do you say? "Oh, do you have a tummy ache?" No. What would you say if a teenager threw up on your shoulder? You know, it would be totally different. You know, it wouldn't be like, "Oh, do you have a tummy ache? Get away from me!" You know, so things change. You know, and those little kids who are so cute and adorable, as they get older, they start to look you in the eye, and the things they choose are not the things you would choose. You know, and they make decisions that are not good decisions, and they have friends who are not good friends, and they do these things that you can't believe they would. Are you still supposed to love them unconditionally? Yes. In fact, one of the greatest examples of unconditional love I ever saw was one by a father. And I was the associate pastor of a church, and we had a situation where a girl was going to have a baby, and it wasn't a great thing. You know? And we decided that we would let the church body know. And so I was leading the worship that day, and it was a room about this size. And when I kind of led the worship, and when I was done, I walked over to the side, and the senior pastor went down the center aisle, and he went to where the girl was sitting on the inside of the aisle. And he put his arm around her, and he pulled her to her feet, and he just said, "Oh, we've got some family stuff we need to take care of." It was a beautiful moment. It was not a church discipline thing. It was just letting the body know what was going on. And as I stood against the wall, I kind of watched everybody. And I'm no kidding, just about everybody had their head down. Because it was awkward, they didn't know what to do, and felt embarrassing. And I noticed that where the girl stood, her entire family took up the whole row. And it was like aunts and uncles, you know, cousins. They just took up the whole thing. And I noticed that every single one of them had their head down. Because they were disappointed, they were embarrassed by the attention. Everyone had their head down except one person. Would you like to guess who it was? Her father, Don. Don sat right next to where his daughter was standing. And he sat as straight as a rainbow. I mean, his head was up like this. And he was just scanning the crowd, you know, looking over everybody. Over on the side, I could like read his thoughts. And they were like, "Has anybody got a problem with this? Just put your hand up right now, we'll take it out back right now. Anybody, speak now or forever hold your peace." And I thought, was he disappointed? Yes. Was he embarrassed? Yes. Was it awkward? Yes. Did he prove to his daughter that he loved her more than anything? Yes. That is unconditional love. You need to teach that to your children. And you need to teach that to your children by loving your spouse and loving your children. Again, that's hard to do sometimes with spouses. You know, husbands, I'm going to put the brunt on you. You know, I used to say all the time, you know, husbands, if there's not love in your house, you know, it's your fault. Unfortunately, my wife knew that little thing that I used to say, and she reminded me of that, which I hated. You know, and I get tired that it's my fault. I get tired that I'm the responsible one. There are times I'll say to my wife, "Can't you just handle it? Why do I have to be?" But I can't get because God made that. Gave me that responsibility as the head of my wife, as the head of my family. And there are times I'm laying in my bed, and she's rolled over and she's mad, and I'm thinking, I didn't do anything, I'm not going to apologize. I'm always apologizing. And I can almost hear God's voice like, God, make it right. And I'm like, but I didn't do anything, and have her make it right. And then I can kind of feel him thumping me in the chest. I'm like, thump her in the chest, and when she comes over here, then I'll be all. It's not very dangerous, is it? So finally, I kind of, soften myself. And I roll over, and I put my arm around her, and she goes, don't touch me. And I'm like, fine, I tried. But I can't get away from it. Oh, that's me. Hold on. This could be from like a hurricane zone, but we're going to say goodbye. But here's the deal. This is not just about me. Our marriage is not just about the two of us. It's so much bigger than that. In fact, I can remember one of my older kids, or actually my two oldest sons, they were like, Dad, remember I told you that we went through that hard time? And they said, Dad, that's not fair. Mom's being too hard on you. She's being unfair. She's being too unreasonable. And I can remember taking them into their room and pulling the door shut. And getting in their face and saying, I never want to hear that out of your mouth again. Because I made a promise that I would love your mother. I will love your mother no matter what. Now, I'm not the world's greatest husband. You can even ask my wife. Maybe not today. But I know this. My son, who just got married a year and some months ago, and looks so in love, and they look like newlyweds. It's so fun to watch them. There will come a time when his wife will hate him, because that's just the way it is. And guess what? He better learn to love his wife unconditionally. Guess what he's going to learn that? From me. Dads, your wife needs you to love her no matter what. That is not for the faint of heart. In fact, that's dangerous loving. I was talking to a guy that if I mentioned his name, you would all know who he is. And he was saying, yeah, Tom, what you're saying, I almost said it in his voice. He said, what you're saying is we're supposed to be doormats. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying that at all. And I didn't have a very good answer. But then later on, I was reading my Bible down in my office, and I came across this verse, super familiar. Remember it? Greater love has no man than this, that a man lays down his life for his friend or for another. And when I read that, I was just like, that sounds like a doormat! And I found a bunch of verses that talk about me laying down my life for someone else. I'll tell you, sometimes it does look like a doormat. Sometimes I lovingly put myself down for someone else. Here's that person. Sorry. Oh, that wasn't the same person. It's probably my wife. No, it's my son. Sorry, I'm not going to turn it off. But, and that's dangerous loving. That's what you're... Hold on. Hey, Tommy, I'm like right in the middle of talking. I'm like, have you on the microphone right now. Can I call you back in a little bit? Okay. Okay, we'll check with you. Okay, thanks, Tommy. Bye. That's a great thing about being down here is like half the men are named Tommy. Well, that service was canceled, so I don't have to go anywhere after this. So we can just hang out all day. So he won't call back, I'm pretty sure. He's probably pretty embarrassed right now. But that's why men, we've got some t-shirts. In fact, we started this movement, this thing that says #StayingMarried, because, I was kind of, for my children living in this world, I didn't know, because the culture is changing so much. I didn't know what to do because they're redefining marriage, they're redefining family, they're redefining everything. And I didn't know if I should get a million men and we should go to Washington or we should boycott. And I thought, I don't know what to do, but here's what I can do. I can stay married. Because I come to these talks, I go and talk to people all over the place, and I'll tell you, there are so many times when I'll talk to you, and then I get an email 6 months later and say, oh, you came to our church in Rock Hill, but my wife and I aren't married anymore. I tell you, that breaks my heart. And it's bigger than you, because your children are watching. You need to teach them to love unconditionally, to love their spouses and to love their children unconditionally. Along with that, husbands, you need to teach your sons and daughters, or sons especially, how to ask forgiveness. Because men, if we're typified by something, we're typified by not asking forgiveness. I don't know why that is and what that says about us, but we just don't do it. But I'll tell you, asking forgiveness is a great equalizer, and you must do it. But I'll tell you, your idea of asking forgiveness and your wife's idea of forgiveness is totally different. I remember one time I'll say something or do something and hurt my wife, and I know it, and so I'm saying, I'm sorry, man, will you forgive me? She's like, yeah. And so a couple days later, I see a little cloud over her. And I'm like, honey, what's wrong? She goes, well, a couple days ago you said that one thing, and it just really hurt my feelings. And I'm like, she'll say, why did you say that? And I'm like, I don't even remember saying it. And she's like, well, it hurt. I'm like, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? And she says, yeah. And I'm like, good, let's move on. But then a couple days later, that cloud is still there. And I'm like, honey, what is the problem? And she goes, well, back then you said this, and it really hurt. And I'm like, honey, I am so sorry. I can see that I hurt you deeply. Will you forgive me? And then we talk about it some more, and we talk about it some more, and we talk about it some more, and probably some more. And then finally, she said, yes. And the cloud blows away. Husbands, take it to the end. Take it to the end. Because your children are watching. I'll tell you, I get that opportunity even at my own house. I remember I said to one of my sons, it was just like I jumped into the middle of something, and I told my son, I said, go to your room, I was furious. And my wife's like, where did that come from? I'm like, I don't know, but it came really fast, I couldn't stop it. And a few minutes later, I kind of calmed down. I go into his room, get pull the door shut. And I said, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve to have a dad like me. I said, will you forgive me? My son said, yeah, I forgive you, Dad. And then I said, do you know how much I love you? And he goes, yeah, I do. I think he knows that, not because of my actions always, but because I ask forgiveness, and it clears the slate. Husbands, you lead the way. You show your children how to ask forgiveness. If your wife is brooding on something, you take it to the end. And I know some of us, we don't want to bring it up again because it's going to be ugly, We'd like to just pretend it never happened. Take it to the end. That's dangerous. On the other side of that, ladies, you need to show your children how forgiveness is given. Because sometimes if ladies are typified, they're typified by not offering forgiveness. In fact, we have some friends, Tom and Vicky. They're a great couple. And they've been married probably 40 years, but they have always said they do not love each other. Never have loved each other. Sometimes it's brutal. I can remember Tom saying, I don't like anything about my wife. I don't like her smile. I don't like her laugh. I don't like anything. And yet they function. They raise 4 children, and their kids are older, about my age. But one time I was with Vicky, and she said, well, when I used to love Tom, and I stopped her. I'm like, what do you mean you used to love Tom? She goes, what do you mean? I said, you always said you never loved Tom, and now you're saying you used to. Used to and never are not the same. She goes, yeah, but that was a long time ago. I said, yeah, but it's not the same. I said, what happened? She said, well, it was one of those first year we were married. And she said, we were in the kitchen, Tom's parents' kitchen. And I was working at the kitchen, she's speaking. I was working with his mother, and we were doing something in the kitchen, and Tom was outside working. Tom came inside He put his arms around his mother's waist and he gave her a little kiss on the cheek. And then he walked out. And she said, and he never even acknowledged me. I've never been able to forgive him. And I said, Vicki, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I said, but I couldn't convince her. You know, now she had 4 children. She had one daughter who was about my age. And her husband failed her miserably. Do you think she's having a hard time forgiving him? Oh, yeah. Because the lesson was taught. Moms, if you're holding on to something, you know, and I know we husbands have hurt. We do. That's what we do. That's like Tigger. You know, we are goofs, and we say mean things and dumb things, and we should have come through, but we didn't. If you're holding on to something, just let it go. You know, if you ask forgiveness or not, you can bring it up, but just let it go. Let it go. I could sing the song if you want me to, but I won't. You know, because it's not just about you. It's about those children who are watching. And that is a huge, huge lesson. Husbands, you need to teach your children you need to teach your sons, really, how to lead dangerously. Husbands, you need to show your sons that you're leading this. Because if I ask ladies, I ask them, what do you want in a strong Christian husband? You know what they always say to me? They always say, we want a strong Christian leader. Now, husbands, you need to be leading. That means by coming here, you led, even if your wife made you come. But, you know, to be responsible. You know, we've got some books back there. I'm going to give you a commercial in a little bit. Husbands, I want you to show your wife that you're committed to this by just buying something. You know, you can pick out the cheapest thing or you can pick out the most expensive thing. I really prefer the most expensive thing. But, you know, that means so much to your wife. Because I have ladies come by my table all the time and say, oh, that'd be a great book for my husband, but he'd never read it. What does that mean? What are they saying to me? He doesn't care. You know, he's got his own thing, but this is not one. Family's not one of those things. To my shame, I wonder if my wife would say that about me. You know, because she wants me to lead this. You need to teach your sons how to lead their future lives by leading, by trusting, by loving, unconditionally, by, you know, staying married. But I'm going to put the brunt on you wives. Because you know what I found out? That when I asked those wives, when they said, we want a strong Christian leader, you know what I finally figured what that really means? You want someone to lead you where you already want to go. You know? Because I thought I was pretty smart before I got married. All husbands thought we were smart before we got married. We could do simple tasks all by ourselves. We could find a parking spot in any parking place all by ourselves. And it was a perfectly suitable parking space. You know, like when I first got married, we pull into a parking lot, and I pull into a spot, and my wife goes, why are you parking here? And I'm like, because it's empty? I don't know, is this a trick question? And she's like, well, why do you park closer? I'm like, fine, sure. And I'm like, no, not over here, over there. Yeah, right, okay. You know, and I got to the place where I kind of freeze up pulling into a parking spot. You know, I'm like, where do you want to park? She goes, I don't care. I'm like, that's not true! In fact, one time I was at this large gathering, and it was a bunch of ladies, I mean, maybe 500 ladies, and I told them, now the next day, when you come into this event, tell your husband he did a good job parking the car. So don't go overboard like, wow, this is the best spot we ever had. You know, we're not stupid. The next day, this guy comes up to me. He's from Massachusetts, but he must have been from southern Massachusetts because he has an accent. Anyway, I don't know what you told those, and you're thinking I'm talking normal right now. I don't know what you told those women yesterday, but my wife told me I did a good job parking the car. And then without a hint of a smile on his face, he just kind of leaned in towards me. And he went, it'll never last. And he walked away. What was he saying to me? Because what's the use? You know, I can never do anything right. Sometimes, ladies, you know, that's what we feel as husbands. We feel like we can never do anything right. You know? And it's bigger than just us. Your children are watching that. Your daughters are watching that. Your sons. And so we husbands are like little puppies. Now, I won't say husbands. We men are like little puppies. And sometimes we start very young. And we want to lead because God put it in our hearts to lead, you know. And so we stick out our little noses and we get smacked on the nose with a rolled up newspaper because it's the wrong direction. We do it again. And we keep doing that. After a while, guess what we don't do? We don't stick our noses out anymore. And we husbands, ladies, your hearts will be burdened, and you're like, oh, I just don't know what to do about this. What do you think we should do, honey? And your husband's like, I don't know, honey. Anything you want to do is fine with me. Do you like that answer, ladies? You hate that answer. Do you know why you get that answer? Because we give an answer, and then you do something different. And so we figured out real quick that, I just won't stick my nose out anymore. I believe there are men don't lead for two reasons. One, because they've learned from their wives not to lead. And another reason, maybe even bigger, is they learn from their mothers not to lead. Because you moms, you're moms. You take care of your children. You want everything to be neat and tidy. And so you're always coming behind the fixing things. You need to let your boys, your little boys lead. Not in everything. Where do you want to go, honey? No, not that. But you let them fail. You let them go. There was a mom who was a single mom, and she had a troubled teenage son. And she called me one day, and she said, hey, my son, his car, I think his battery's dead. He's at, CVS. And she said, could you go get it? Could you go help him? And I was a pastor at the time, so they thought I had unlimited resources and time to go help people. And I'm like, that's like 25 minutes away. I said, you need to just have him ask somebody in the parking lot to help jumpstart it. And she said, well, he's never done it before. I said, well, that doesn't matter. Just tell him to go up to someone and say, hey, I've never jumpstarted a car before. Can you help me? She goes, well, I don't think he has any jumper cables. I said, that's okay. Just put up the hood of your car and say, I don't have any jumper cables. Can you help jumpstart me? She goes, I think he's going to be, he'll be afraid to do that. I'm like, let him do it anyway. Afterwards, he's going to feel like he fixed the car, He's going to feel like a man. And I said, let me know how it goes. And so she didn't call me back. And the next, I think it was the next day or maybe the day after, I bumped into her at like Walmart. I said, hey, how'd that go with Steven? She goes, oh, I just called someone else and they went down. Moms, the temptation is to save your children all the time. Don't. Let them lead and fail. Let them stick their noses out like those puppies and not get smacked and just keep going. And I'll tell you, your future daughter-in-laws will thank you. Okay, so you need to teach your sons how to lead dangerously. You need to teach your sons, we're almost out of time. You need to teach your sons how to guard dangerously. Remember last night you were at the panel, I hope, just about everybody was there. That was really interesting to me. And I mentioned that I got rid of my smartphone because I had done phone. I didn't do it for me. I did it for my children. Because I wanted to see them maybe give up something later. Because it's causing a problem. Because, I hear all the time. I refer to it as a techno beast, and I'll say, it's got its talons in us. I think sometimes it's sweeping away our children because it's sweeping away us. I'll tell you, if your moms, if your kids say to you, you hear this phrase in your house, is mom on Facebook again? That means you're being pulled away. Dad, if you're playing video games and you hear that phrase from your wife, like, where's Dad? Is he doing that dumb game again? Or whatever it is, you need to stop. Because it's not about you. And you could say, well, it's no big deal. It is a big deal. Because your children are learning from you as they watch you. That's my fear. My fear is that my kids are going to be swept away in this wave of technology. And they're going to exchange virtual relationships, or real relationships, for virtual ones. Because real relationships are really, really hard. Husbands, I'm going to put some of the brunt on you. Sometimes our wife, why she wants to be on Facebook all the time, or Instagram, or whatever? Because she can't talk to us. Because we're too busy. I have a friend who said, I told my wife I can't be her little buddy. I'm just so busy to just chit-chat all the time. Now she's on Facebook and she has lots of little buddies. My fear would be that one of those little buddies will turn into a big buddy one day. son, my second oldest son, you know, he doesn't have a smartphone. He has this same red phone, which is a stupid, terrible phone. It only can tell the time. It barely it's a pain to text. And it is a pain. But he decided he's not going to go with a smartphone, even though he's a technology guy. My oldest son who's married, you know, he loves smartphones. He loves technology. He likes to play video games. But I'm hoping that as he saw his dad give up things for his family, I'm hoping that one day he'll be able to do the same. Because he saw his dad do it, because he was taught. So you need to teach your children how to guard dangerous things. I'm going to stop there. Because I don't want to throw off the rest of the schedule. Can I just give you a little commercial of stuff that we have back there? Let me just say again, here's the deal about